back to another rendition of Storms of Furey. We've done about 25 of these at least, maybe even more. But now today, here in the start of the new year, 2026, yes, we have a very special guest with us today. Now, this particular person, well, first off, he's my best friend. I was the best man in his wedding. We have been great friends for over 30 years now. And he is somebody that most of you know. And he's somebody that was the stalwart and the really calming, stable issue in terms of, well, when bad weather was coming in, he told you the way it was. And he always got it right. Well, maybe not. But no, we're going to talk about a storm today that this particular person did not get right, going way back in time. And he certainly was in Connecticut for a long time. 42 years, to be exact, if I'm not mistaken. He was someone that, is probably the best at what he does. His ability to explain and to present is unlike anybody else. He is a great teacher. He's a great man. Nobody nicer in the entire world that you will find than this guy right here. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome today to Storms of Furey, Mr. Bruce DePrest. Brucer, how are you?
Hello, Joe. Joe, I thought you were talking about yourself.
I was dead, but then I figured I'd throw you in there.
Right back at you, my good friend.
Bruce, it's so wonderful to have you here today, and it's been so wonderful to, be with you for these 30-plus years. We have a great friendship. It's amazing how you and I can talk, and we've done this even in the past. We can talk on the phone, and we never talk about the weather. Well, we just talk about everything that's going on.
That's right.
Yeah, right? So, Bruce, let's today talk about the past and take it back to when you started and talk about a weather service that was in place in Connecticut back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that you started with, and some of the great people that were with that service, and what are some of the things that happened back then, and then we'll work it through the years and see what the difference is from then till now. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bruce DePrest.
Joe, thank you very much for having me on your show. You know, that's going back a long ways when we have to talk about the Travelers Weather Service. But I remember those as some of my best years because I had a chance to work with some great forecasters. Now, then there was John Erickson. He was a great forecaster. Jim McDonald, oh my gosh, he was such a mentor. He graduated from MIT. Those were great beginnings. I learned so much, and then
And you know
what happened from there? Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was going to say what happened from there. What was so amazing was that Travelers Weather Service disbanded. What year? What time?
Yes,
When did that disband?
that was 1984.
84.
They
Okay.
disbanded. You know, Travelers, we were owned by the Travelers Insurance Company, and I guess, we were costing them something like $40,000 a year. We weren't quite self-sustained. Travelers had to put in a little money, but when you think of the popularity of hearing all the people from the Travelers Weather Service, Charlie Bagley and Bob Steele everybody listened to that. We kind of scratched our head and said, why? Why did they decide to get rid of the Travelers Weather Service? So
Uh,
that was a pivotal time in my career because, Charlie came up to me and said, you know, this is going to be going out of business pretty
the,
soon.
$40,000. That's not
I
a lot of
know.
money. And
No,
they implemented that because of insurance costs due to bad weather, and they wanted to make sure they were on top of everything. And then all of a sudden they said
exactly.
goodbye to it, which made no
I
sense.
know. I
But
know.
then,
And you consider all the times we got on there because every time we did a radio forecast, it would be the Travelers Weather Service forecast. So it was like
the
advertising
advertisement,
galore.
yeah, boom, 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 boom.
I
Yeah.
know.
And now, yeah, just like the golf tournament, Travelers Championship.
Yeah.
So what's so interesting is that it disbanded, but then it sort of came back with Arnold Chase and his idea that he really wanted to put a weather service back into Hartford and
Mhm.
have it to be something that was sort of similar, and it was called the New England Weather Service, and that's how
Mhm.
you and I got to end up working together. And let's talk more about that in our next segment coming up. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Storms of Fury, segment 2, as we are talking to one of Connecticut's greatest meteorologists, Mr. Bruce DePrest. Bruce, 42 years, right, Bruce, at Channel 3?
43.
43. I cheated him a year. How about that? Okay, so let's take it back into the early 80s and some of the big storms that we have experienced here in Connecticut. We go through these times now where it's been not doing much, and we kind of tend to forget what has happened in the past. And so what's a memory of a big storm for you that was there for you when your career started?
Well, even before my career started, when I was still in school, some of the biggest impact storms on my life occurred. Um, Go back to 1973. That was December 17th, I believe, 1973, when the Connecticut River Valley had a horrific ice storm. We haven't had one like that since, at least in the
Remember
Connecticut
it
River
well.
Valley.
Yes.
Yep. Joe, I think it was like an inch and a half of rain with the temperature at or below freezing.
And
And not only did a lot of people, including me, lose power, but it got so cold after the storm. I think it went down to zero, and it was like a world of ice, like a world of glass. It was just surreal. We haven't seen anything like that
and and
since, at least in
and
the
so many power outages and people with no
Mhm.
heat. And I remember we had two families staying with us down in Norwalk. Somehow we kept our power where I was,
Wow.
and we had people in the house for several days, many days.
We had no power for about 5 days, and it got so cold. My father had everything like couches and beds all lined up around the fireplace. We had that fireplace going nonstop. And do you know that when the power came back on and we let the power, or we cleaned out the fireplace, that fire got so hot that the metal grate of the fireplace melted right down to the brick.
Are you serious?
Uh-huh.
Oh
Yeah.
my. Okay. All right.
So that was crazy. That was in my junior year of high school, 1973, and of course in college, in my senior year, and I was going to school up in Lowell, Massachusetts,
Oh,
UMass Lowell, which is now it's UMass Lowell, but way back in the day it was Lowell Technological Institute, Lowell University, but 1978 was the blizzard of '78,
and you
and
were in
man,
the
that part.
jackpot. You were in the jackpot zone.
Boy, were we ever. It was funny because I was living in an apartment with my roommates, and all the cars in the parking lot, you couldn't see a car. Where there was a roof, it looked like a mogul.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
The hurricane force winds. Right. It was getting up
Yep.
there at 70 plus, and it
Yeah.
stalled for 40 hours. It didn't
It did.
move.
There were two waves from that storm, two waves of heavy snow, and I think Chatham had a gust of over 90 miles an hour. That was a crazy storm. It wasn't a record snowstorm in terms of snowfall for places like Windsor Locks, but I mean, when you talk about the blowing and drifting and the persistence, the two punches that it came in on, it was one of the more impactful storms that I could remember, quite
And,
honestly.
and the problem being back then is that, people didn't believe weather forecasts, and there were some forecasts out there that stated there could be a big storm, but everybody left that morning and went out, and many people didn't make it home.
Yeah, Joe, do you remember the LFM?
No, I sure do. The limited fine mesh. Yes.
That was the model of choice back then, and nowadays that would be considered an archaic model, but that model nailed the blizzard of
It
'78.
did. It did. Isn't that
Yeah,
amazing?
yeah,
Yeah, of course,
yeah.
we had the NGM, and we know what that stood for. No good model.
No, good model.
So, yeah, it really, over time, when you think about the fact that, back then, getting the weather forecast right was very hard to do, and there were so many storms prior and after the blizzard
Oh
of
yeah.
'78. And then you look back 40 years prior when we had, of course, the hurricane of 1938 that came in with the forecast for showers and breezy because we had no idea it
Yeah.
was coming.
Yeah.
Our technology has gotten better through time, but certainly those '70s and early '80s were tough to forecast. Any other storms you can think of in the early '80s?
Okay, because I know before you alluded to a major bust forecast, but let me start with the Triumph.
Oh,
That
do the
was in
try. He doesn't want to talk about the busted forecast.
No, we'll
Yes.
get to that because as you know, this is a very humbling business.
Oh
So
gosh,
it
yeah.
was April 1982, and I was
Oh yeah.
I was doing the noon show with Marlene Schneider,
Yep.
and this is one of those days when I was probably filling in for Charlie. So I said, I got a bad feeling about tomorrow. I think I used like bad vibrations about tomorrow. And I said, here it is April, and I'm forecasting 12 to 16 inches of snow. And the next day we got it. This was Channel 3 named it, I believe it was Blizzard Olaf. And
Olaf, yes, yes, yes.
Olaf. And do you know the next day, and this is hard to do, but the next day, the temperature never made it out of the 20s, and that was in April.
That's amazing. That's
That's
amazing.
pretty
Yeah.
pretty far out. Yep, it's
Right in the
crazy.
right in the Easter time. Right in the Easter
Yeah.
time. So, how about any other storms that stick out in your mind?
How about 1983? Should we talk about that one?
Oh no, you don't want to talk about that one. No, that's not. No, no. I'm sorry. You're.
Well,
Well, I
that's
remember it well.
okay.
I remember it well because I was in college and I was in Philadelphia. So we
Well,
were.
that okay. So let's talk about the setup. First of all, this was on the air with Bob Steele. I was on the morning radio, and we're talking about a storm that was really impacting the Middle Atlantic coast,
Yes.
and then we had this Arctic high, this wall of dry air, and very cold air, Arctic air that was going to block the storm. And I was forecasting 1 to 2 inches of snow on TIC that morning. So basically, what actually happened was that Arctic air provided the perfect lift for all this moist Gulf air to come over the top of it, squeeze out snow at 4 inches an hour with thunder, snow, and all that. So here I am at home after saying 1 to 2 inches. My forecast busted within a half an hour. We were getting 4 inches an hour, and it would turn out to be the biggest 24-hour snowfall on record
Right.
for the Hartford area.
Until February 9th of 2013. So yeah, so that's the ultimate bust. Yep. You
Yeah, well, it was hard coming in
we
the next day and explaining that one.
yeah, we've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
And it's honestly, you could be in this business for 43 years or more, and there's always going to be that time when you go in the next day and say, "What happened?" and you're scratching your head. That's how weather is. It's not a perfect science. We still got a ways to go before, it's a perfect science. I don't know if we'll ever get there.
all right, well, next segment, let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and the rest of the winter of 2025, 2026 and see what Bruce has to say.
Okay.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Yes, we have a Connecticut legend. He's the best in the state in terms of a meteorologist, an atmospheric scientist. I learned so much from this man, and we had such the great honor and pleasure of working with him for so long. Best man in his wedding, his beautiful wife,
Yes.
Cheryl, and his little companion dog, Albie. Yeah,
There he
where's
is right
Albie?
there.
Hi, Albie. Look at that. Always right there. Always right there, taking care of
Yeah.
everybody. So Bruce, you have brought up the point where we move along now through the 2000s, and when you look at big snowstorms, what have you noticed about the fact that as far as the amounts of snow that have fallen, when has been the snowiest time in some of the bigger ones that we've seen in the 2000s?
Well, three of the biggest snowstorms on record have been since 2006. And, the last couple of winters have been sort of like lackluster. So we kind of lose sight of the fact that ever since 2000, we've had some real doozies. Like you go back to 2011 when we had a blizzard, 24 inches of snow in less than 24 hours. That became the biggest snowstorm, a record 24-hour snowfall. And of course, was in January, and that January itself was a record with, I believe, 54.8
Yeah, correct.
inches of
Yes.
snow.
Yes. And a big thank you to our producer, Juliana, for pictures from her backyard back in 2011.
Yeah,
So,
that was bad. I remember getting up on the roof and
yes.
having
Yeah,
to shovel snow off of it.
exactly. Exactly. And
Mhm.
then, of course, even bigger going into 2013.
Well, even before that, we had the big Halloween snowstorm later on in
Oh,
2011.
yeah. Oh,
And
wait
there
a
we
minute. Wait a
are.
minute. See, Bruce is bringing up a great point here because this is a storm that, we tend to forget about, and it probably was our most horrifying and paralyzing snowstorm we've ever had.
Yep, it was the biggest The greatest power outage ever in the state of Connecticut. I think, what was it, like close to 900,000
Yeah,
people?
yeah, 900,000 plus. Yeah, yep.
Yeah, yeah. And that was because, right before Halloween, the leaves were still on the trees and you
The-
had this heavy, wet snow, 12 to 18 inches. And
do you know that
you know what
October?
happens.
That October 2011 was 4.5 degrees above average up until that snowstorm.
Yep.
Up until that snowstorm, I was swimming in our pool on Columbus Day weekend,
Oh,
and
no,
and, and then it was in the
that's
80s. It was in the
crazy.
80s then. Yeah. So that
Yeah.
storm came along. You talk about scary people trapped in their homes for days, couldn't go anywhere. You talk about getting to the store to buy
Yeah.
supplies. That's the storm you had to do it in. So
I
yeah,
know. It's awful.
that was terrible. That was
That was
absolutely
a that
terrible.
was that was a terrible
Dangerous.
storm. It was dangerous. Of course, it was dangerous for for many communities. Halloween was canceled because of all the trees and power lines
Yep.
down.
Yep. Yep.
So that was 19. That was the same year that we had the record snowfall in January.
And
Then,
Irene
but
in August that year as well.
that's right.
Yeah.
That was a crazy year. But then, after that October snowstorm, the rest of the winter was like a piece of cake.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Which is usually the case when you get something like that.
Yeah,
But then we, of course, went to Sandy in 2012, 1 year later. And then 2013 is now the record 24-hour snowfall of 3 feet in Ansonia, Connecticut.
that's right. Isn't that a state record too?
State record. Yep. State record. Yep.
That's a
Exactly.
state record. So, I mean, we saw a lot of records fall in these, ever since 2010, quite honestly. And that wasn't the end of it. Not only did we have that horrible storm, and yeah, that was coming down, what, 4 inches an hour with some thundered snow. And I remember, Joe, the unusual thing about that storm was the actual storm center was way out in the ocean.
Yeah, and then it was that northern branch jet and the real negative North Atlantic oscillation that pulled it in, kind of like what happened with Sandy.
Yeah, it was like this gigantic whirlpool that just brought everything back in from off the ocean. Then, after that, you talk about records. We what was it? February 2015 was the coldest month on record for the greater Hartford area,
Oh, that's
and
right.
that was 16.1 degrees was the average temperature, February 2015. So you look at all these records that have fallen ever since 2000, and it's pretty amazing when you think that records date back for the greater Hartford area to 1905.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, down the
Mhm.
road, when you talk about artificial intelligence, we kind of have been doing that because we go back pattern recognition and we're trying to find out what do we have now and how does that relate to the past. And so artificial intelligence helps with that. And so it's interesting to see how that all goes. And so any thoughts on the rest of this winter of 2025, 2026?
Well, we're getting into that January thaw period, like we were talking about, just you and me over the phone the other day. We were talking about how December was 4.6 degrees colder than normal, but we had a lot of rainstorms. And now January's off to a cold start, but we got some warming coming our way. In fact, all the snow on the ground may not be here before the week is over. But you mentioned to me that Fairbanks has been, what, 40 to 50 below for over a week.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And at some point, that's got to come marching south. So I still think that later this month and in February, we're going to be in for some mighty cold weather. And it's going to take a lot of mild weather though to get us to a normal winter, because you have to average out December, January, and February, and already we're 4.6 degrees below. So you got to have some pretty mild weather in January overall, and February as well. But I don't know, with all that cold air banked up there,
Yeah,
it's just got to be persistent.
right. And bring it down to
Yeah.
the Gulf of Mexico and get the big storms to form and come up the East Coast. And now we'll get maybe one of these big ones to return to
Yeah, that
Connecticut.
was what was that big blizzard we had, 1993?
93. Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah,
storm of the century.
the
So,
storm of the century. Yep, that's another one.
well, meteorologist Bruce DePrest, the meteorologist of the century. Bruce, thank you for everything you've done here in the state of Connecticut. We love you, and you're an amazing man, and look forward to having you back on again in the future.
I would love it. And right back at you, Joe. You are the best. I learned a lot from you too, and I think we think alike as weather forecasters. We got that instinctive weather forecasting it's experience and all that, but there's also that instinct that I think we have
Right.
that kind of supersedes the model sometimes.
Exactly right. Yeah. That's why you
Mhm.
got to go with your gut. Bruce, thank you so much. Thank
All
you,
right, Joe.
everybody. We'll see you again on Storms of
Bye-bye.
Fury.